I trusted him with my life, until he handed me over to be killed. I pulled the trigger, but that was just the start. Now I'm on the run with a hunted Apache warrior, a ghost from my past, and blood on my hands I can't wash off. I still don't know what broke me more, the betrayal or the bullet I put in my best friend's chest. Maybe it's the whiskey talking, or maybe it's the silence out here that makes the ghosts louder than they used to be. Either way, I've carried this story like a loaded gun, and I think it's time to finally let it fire. It's been years, but the dust of that canyon still clings to me, the stench of gunpowder, the weight of a war that never really ended. I tried to bury the past, to live quiet on the edge of nowhere, just me and the land. But some things won't stay buried, not when they're soaked in blood. You won't believe half of what I'm about to tell you. Hell, some days I still question if any of it really happened. But it did. Every godforsaken bit of it. And if I don't speak it now, I'm afraid it'll rot me from the inside out. My name is Jesse Walker. At least, that's what the world knew me as. I was a soldier once, fought hard, lost harder, saw things no man should carry back home. I came back broken, like a lot of us did, trying to build a life out of the ashes, trying to forget. But peace? Turns out peace is hard to hold on to when your past keeps drawing blood. I found it for a while. A small ranch on the outskirts of Silver Creek, Arizona territory. Just me, my horse Ember, and the endless, unforgiving desert. The land was harsh, yeah, but it was honest. It didn't pretend to be anything it wasn't. Unlike people. People are a whole different kind of cruel. Silver Creek. Sounds pretty, don't it? Don't let the name fool you. That town was built on a foundation of bitterness, as hard as the desert rock. Years of conflict with the Apache had left scars that never healed, festering wounds of resentment and fear. To the folks in Silver Creek, the Apache were devils incarnate, a shadow of a defeated enemy that still loomed large in their nightmares. They hated them with a fervor that chilled me to the bone, even though I'd seen my share of hate in the war. This was different. This was personal, ancestral. I tried to keep to myself, avoided town as much as I could, just wanted to work my land, raise my cattle, and be left alone. But trouble has a way of finding you, don't it? Especially when you're trying so hard to outrun it. It started with whispers. Rumors of an Apache woman, a renegade they called her, still living out in the desert. Tall chief. Her name was spoken in hushed tones, laced with a mixture of fear and a perverse kind of respect. They said she was the last of her line, a direct descendant of the warriors who'd fought their grandfathers. A living symbol of everything they wanted to erase. I didn't pay it much mind at first, just another sad story in a land full of them. But then the whispers grew louder, angrier. The ranchers, led by a man named Caleb Harper, a bull of a man with eyes like chips of ice and a heart full of poison, started talking about finishing the job. They wanted her dead. Not just dead, but erased. Wiped from the face of the earth like she never existed. I remember the first time I heard Harper's plan. The memory of it is as vivid as if it happened yesterday, the bitter taste of dust still stuck in my throat as I entered Silver Creek, the sun burning my neck. I'd just made my way through miles of rugged desert trail, my boots worn and heavy with the weight of solitude. My eyes were red from the heat, but the saloon lights cut through the haze, beckoning me in. The heavy scent of whiskey and sweat hit me as soon as I stepped inside. The air was thick with smoke, curling lazily around the ceiling beams, and the clatter of dice and the low murmur of men spilled across the room. I had no interest in the game they were playing, or in the conversation swirling around me like the dust I'd just left behind. I only needed supplies, flour, tobacco, maybe a shot of something strong to get me through another lonely night. But that's when I heard Harper's voice, booming over the low hum of the bar. "She's a curse on this land!" His voice cracked through the air like a whip, harsh and unyielding. I froze, the hairs on the back of my neck standing up. He slammed his fist down on the bar with such force that the mugs clinked together, rattling. I'd seen men like Harper before, big mouths with even bigger egos, but something about the way he said it, so sure, so violently righteous, made my blood run cold. That Apache witch, Tall Chief, they call her, daughter of devils, he roared, his words punctuated by the laughter and clinking of glass. As long as her bloodline continues, we'll never be safe, we'll never have peace. The room fell silent for a split second, but only a second. Then the chorus of drunken approval erupted like a storm. The men around him, men I'd seen in this saloon before, men who carried knives in their boots and a goddamn snake in their hearts, slammed their fists on the table, nodding like trained dogs. I felt a cold knot twist in my gut. The same coldness that always crept in before a fight, before the killing. Their faces were flushed with the heat of whiskey, their eyes gleaming with a feral hunger, the kind that came just before a slaughter. I could smell the bloodlust on them, thick and sweet. This wasn't about justice, or right or wrong. This was about revenge, a mob drunk on hate, looking for someone to pay for their bitterness. A pulse of fury surged in me, something sharp and jagged, rising up from a place I'd buried long ago. The sound of Harper's voice, the venom that dripped from his words, made my pulse pound in my ears. "She's a curse," they said. My fists clenched involuntarily, my knuckles popping like dry twigs. I could feel my breath catch in my chest, and for a moment, I thought I might lose myself right there in the saloon. The years of burying my past, of running from it, came crashing down like a boulder. I remembered the battles, the blood, the way it had felt to be on the other side of that mob, the way we had been hunted down, just like Tall Chief. And for what? Our blood? Our heritage? The past is a ghost that never leaves you, no matter how hard you try to outrun it. I wanted to walk away, tell myself it wasn't my fight. I'd seen enough death to last a lifetime. I'd sworn off it all, told myself I was a different man now. The war was over, my hands were clean, or at least they should have been. But Harper's words clung to me like the dust of the trail, gnawing at my insides. And then, something inside me snapped. The injustice of it all. A woman hunted because of who her ancestors were. It didn't just stir something in me, it tore something open, like a wound that had never fully healed. I had buried the soldier, the fighter, the man who had fought for survival, but he was still there, buried beneath the layers of guilt and regret. He was still watching, still waiting for a reason to rise again. My heart raced, my pulse quickening. I knew I had to act. This wasn't about righting some ancient wrong. It wasn't even about justice. It was about standing up against something that threatened to consume everything, something I'd sworn I'd never let happen again. I glanced around the saloon, and for a brief moment, I imagined what it would be like to walk out of here and forget it all. But I couldn't. Not this time. But it wasn't just the anger in my chest that made me stay. It was the realization that I was no longer the man I once was. I wasn't the hero of the story. Hell, I wasn't even sure I was a man anymore. I was just another ghost, haunted by the choices I'd made. And the men in this room, they didn't care about history or heritage. They cared about blood, plain and simple. And if I didn't do something, the bloodshed would start again. Only this time, it would be her blood, Tall Chief's blood. I stood there, frozen for a moment, watching the faces around me. Some of the men were grinning, their teeth sharp like wolves, their eyes glinting with that same twisted excitement. They didn't know her. They didn't understand what they were about to do. Hell, they didn't even care. But I did. I cared more than I should. "Not on my watch," I muttered under my breath, almost to myself. I turned away from the bar and started walking out, the weight of my decision settling heavy in my chest. As I pushed open the door, the heat of the desert sun hit me, and for the first time that day, I felt the air fill my lungs without the taste of dust. But there was no escaping what I had just heard. There was no running anymore. I had a choice to make, and there was no turning back. I tried to reason with myself. "It's not your fight, Jesse. You've got your own demons to wrestle. Stay out of it." But the image of that woman, alone out there, hunted like an animal. It wouldn't leave me. The desert had claimed so many lives, but this wasn't the desert. This was men. Men choosing to be monsters. And then there was Sam. Sam Riley. My best friend, or so I thought. We'd met a few years back, both of us trying to make a go of it in this God-forsaken land. He had a small spread a few miles from mine. We'd helped each other out, shared a drink or two, talked about our dreams of building something lasting out here. He knew about my past, or at least the parts I was willing to share. He'd always been a good listener, a steady presence in a life that felt anything but. When I heard Harper's talk, I sought out Sam. I needed to talk to someone, to make sense of the ugliness I'd witnessed. I found him at his ranch, mending a fence. He looked tired, his usual easy smile absent. "You hear about Harper and his boys?" I asked, trying to keep my voice casual. Sam didn't look at me, just kept working on the fence, his movements jerky. "Heard something," he muttered. "They're talking about killing that Apache woman, Tall Chief." He finally stopped, wiped a bead of sweat from his brow with the back of his hand. "Yeah, well, she's Apache, Jesse. Folks around here ain't likely to forget that." His tone, it was off. Defensive, almost. A prickle of unease ran down my spine. "That don't make it right, Sam," I said, my voice harder than I intended. "Hunting her down like a dog." He shrugged, still avoiding my gaze. "It's a complicated situation, Jesse. You weren't here for the worst of it. The raids, the killings, people got long memories. And an even longer thirst for vengeance, seems like," I shot back. I was getting angry now. Angry at Harper, angry at the town, and suddenly, inexplicably, angry at Sam. He finally looked at me then, and his eyes. There was something in them I'd never seen before. A flicker of, was it guilt or fear? "Just stay out of it, Jesse," he said, his voice low. "It's not your fight. You don't want to get caught in the middle of this." His words felt like a warning, but a warning for who? Me? Or him? I left Sam's ranch that day with a knot of dread tightening in my gut. Something was wrong, terribly wrong. And I had a sinking feeling that the peace I'd fought so hard to find was about to be shattered into a million pieces. The next few days were a blur of anxiety. I couldn't shake the image of Tall Chief, a faceless woman marked for death. I'd pace my small cabin at night, the silence of the desert pressing in on me, amplifying the turmoil in my head. My old soldier instincts were kicking in, the ones I'd tried to bury. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. Every gust of wind carried a whisper of danger. I knew I couldn't just sit by. I'd seen too much of what happened when good men did nothing. The war had taught me that much. Silence in the face of evil was complicity, and I'd had enough of being complicit. So, I made my decision, a decision that would change everything, a decision that would lead me down a path of blood and betrayal, a path that would force me to confront not only the darkness in others, but the darkness within myself. I was going to find Tall Chief, and I was going to help her. Even if it meant standing against the whole damn town, even if it meant facing Sam. The sun was setting, painting the jagged mountains in hues of blood orange and deep purple when I rode out. Ember, my sturdy mare, moved with a steady gait, her hooves kicking up small puffs of dust that hung in the still air. I had my rifle in its scabbard, my Colt Peacemaker strapped to my hip, and a cold knot of fear and determination in my chest. I didn't know much about Tall Chief, just the stories, that she was fierce, a survivor, that she knew the desert like the back of her hand. I wasn't going to save her, not really. She didn't need a white savior. What she needed was a chance, a fighting chance. And maybe, just maybe, I could give her that. Finding her wasn't easy. The desert is a vast, unforgiving place, and she was Apache. She knew how to disappear. But I was a soldier, trained to track, to read the signs. And I had a feeling, a gut instinct, that led me towards a remote canyon, a place of towering red rocks and shadowed crevices. As I neared the canyon, I saw her, a lone figure on horseback, silhouetted against the dying light. She sat tall and straight, her gaze fixed on the horizon. Even from a distance, I could feel the power radiating from her. She wasn't just a woman, she was a warrior. Her hair, dark as a raven's wing, was pulled back from a face that was all sharp angles and weathered strength. Her eyes, when she finally turned them on me, were like chips of obsidian, glinting with an intelligence and a weariness that spoke of a lifetime of struggle. I reined Ember in, my hand raised in a gesture of peace. "Tall Chief?" I called out, my voice hoarse. She didn't speak, just watched me, her expression unreadable. I could feel her sizing me up, judging my intentions. I wouldn't have blamed her if she'd put an arrow in me right then and there. A white man, riding towards her in the dead of night. It wasn't exactly a recipe for trust. "I'm not here to hurt you," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The ranchers from Silver Creek, they're forming a mob. They're coming for you." A flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear, more like resignation, as if she'd been expecting this. "I know," she said, her voice low and resonant, like the rumble of distant thunder. It was the first time I'd heard her speak, and her voice sent a shiver down my spine. It was filled with a quiet power that commanded respect. "They plan to strike at dawn," I continued. "We don't have much time." She tilted her head, her gaze never leaving mine. "And you? Why do you care, white man?" It was a fair question. Why did I care? I wasn't sure I could put it into words. Maybe it was the soldier in me, the part that still believed in fighting for the underdog. Maybe it was something deeper, something I didn't understand yet. "Let's just say I don't like lynch mobs," I said gruffly. "And I believe a person has the right to fight for their life." She studied me for a long moment, her eyes searching mine. I could feel the weight of her scrutiny, the generations of mistrust and betrayal that stood between us. Then she nodded slowly. "The coyotes howl tonight," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It is a night for running or for fighting." "I'm hoping for a bit of both," I replied. "But mostly, I'm hoping to get you out of here before they arrive." She didn't argue, didn't question me further, just turned her horse and motioned for me to follow. "Then let us ride," she said. "The desert knows how to hide those who respect its ways." And so, we rode. Two strangers, bound by a common enemy and the desperate hope for survival. The night was long and cold, the silence between us thick with unspoken thoughts and fears. The moon, a silver sliver in the inky sky, cast long, dancing shadows across the rugged landscape, making the familiar desert seem alien and menacing. Tall Chief rode like a phantom, her movements fluid and economical, her senses preternaturally alert. She seemed to blend into the landscape, a part of the wild, untamed spirit of the desert itself. I watched her, a strange mix of admiration and unease churning within me. There was a strength in her, a resilience that was both awe-inspiring and intimidating. She was everything the settlers feared, and more. She was the desert incarnate, beautiful, deadly, and unyielding. As we rode through the desolate land, the sun sinking lower on the horizon, I couldn't help but notice the way Tall Chief moved, calm, controlled, every inch of her a part of the land beneath her. She didn't rush. She didn't seem afraid of the vast emptiness surrounding us. It was as if she had been born into the desert, and it had accepted her every step of the way. At first, she didn't speak much, but her silence wasn't uncomfortable. It felt like she was listening to the wind, listening for something that the rest of us couldn't hear. Her horse, a sleek black creature with a quiet stride, seemed to glide over the dust, barely leaving a trace. It was as if they were one, her and the land, a perfect match, a harmony. But then, as we wound through the jagged cliffs and dry terrain, she started to talk. Her voice was soft, almost a whisper, as though she didn't want to disturb the desert's sacred stillness. She spoke about the land, about the plants and animals, describing them with a reverence that felt foreign to me, but still, it was mesmerizing. She named every plant, every tree, like each one had a story to tell. The yucca, she said, pointing to the tall, spiny plant by the trail, has roots that go deep. It survives through droughts. When you need it most, it gives. It wasn't just the words that struck me, but the way she said them. She spoke with the weight of knowledge, a quiet authority that made me want to listen more, even if I didn't fully understand. As we moved forward, I could feel the tension easing from my shoulders, like I was hearing something important, something that might not have an immediate meaning, but would linger with me long after we'd passed. Eventually, the conversation drifted, as it inevitably did, toward her people, the Apache. Her tone shifted, becoming more reflective. She spoke about them in a way that made her ancestors feel like living, breathing companions walking alongside her. "My grandfather was a chief," she said, her voice softer now, filled with a quiet pride. "A warrior. He led our people with strength, with wisdom. He was the one who held our tribe together in times of war, but also in times of peace." Her eyes, sharp and steady, met mine for a fleeting moment before she turned her gaze back to the path ahead. At that moment, I could see it, the reverence, the longing in her eyes as she spoke. She wasn't just recounting the history of her people. She was invoking something deeper, something more powerful. Her face softened as she spoke of him, her lips barely moving as if she were offering a silent prayer. I could almost see him, her grandfather, looming over us in the shadows, a ghost whose presence still lingered, guiding her. I'm not a man who believes in ghosts, spirits, or anything that can't be touched or seen. The war had stripped that away from me, stripped me of any belief in something higher than the violence that seemed to rule the world. But when Tall Chief spoke of her grandfather, something about the way she said it, something about the certainty in her voice, made me pause. I couldn't explain it, but I felt it. It was like there was something bigger than us, something watching over us. The wind howled through the canyon, its mournful cry rattling the rocks. At first, I thought it was just the desert playing tricks on my mind. But as I rode beside her, listening to her speak, I swore I heard something else. A whisper, almost imperceptible, carried on the wind. At first, I thought it was the wind itself, but no, this wasn't just the wind. This was something else, a voice too old to understand, but unmistakably there. Tall Chief didn't flinch. She didn't look up or around, as if she knew exactly what I was hearing. She simply nodded once, as though the voice of the land spoke to her in ways that couldn't be understood by the likes of me. I wanted to ask her about it, about the whisper, but something in her expression, something like a protective shield, told me that these things were sacred, that they were for her and her people alone. The silence that followed felt heavy, weighted with 1,000 unspoken thoughts. I wanted to say something, to ask, but the words seemed hollow. Instead, we just kept riding. The desert stretched out before us, endless and unyielding. Yet, as the miles passed under our horses' hooves, I began to feel the distance between myself and my past shrinking. The longer I was with her, the more I realized how small my world had been before. Tall Chief was connected to something far bigger than any of us could comprehend. We needed to find a place to stop, to rest, to plan our next move. The canyon had swallowed us whole, the sharp rocks rising around us like a natural fortress. There was no safe haven here, only the harsh reality of the land. But Tall Chief seemed unbothered. Her eyes scanned the horizon with a sharpness that felt almost predatory, yet calm, like a hawk waiting for the right moment to strike. "There's a place," she said, her voice steady. "A pass. Hidden, but it's defensible. A choke point where a few can hold off many." I looked at her surprised. She hadn't mentioned anything about a plan, but her confidence now seemed like something carved from stone. "Where?" I asked, my voice hoarse from the dry air. She didn't answer right away, but instead turned her gaze to the rocks ahead, narrowing her eyes. She didn't need to explain further. I could see it in the way she moved, the way she knew this land better than any map. "It's not far," she said, "and we'll need to make it there before nightfall." I followed her lead, trusting in her instincts, as she guided us through a series of narrow canyons, the walls closing in around us like a trap. The landscape here was different, tighter, more intimate, as if the earth itself was preparing to shield us. The shadows lengthened as the sun dipped lower, and the wind howled again, louder this time, as if it were urging us on. The further we traveled, the more I felt the weight of our journey, the gravity of the choices we had made. But with Tall Chief leading the way, it felt like I wasn't just following a woman on horseback. I was following something older, something that could not be easily defined or explained. It was a strange kind of peace, this silence. Even as the danger pressed closer, I knew this place, this moment, was one where only the strongest would survive. And maybe, just maybe, I wasn't as far from my past as I thought. But getting there was proving to be harder than I thought. The mob was closer than I'd anticipated. We could hear the faint, distant sound of horses, the occasional shout carried on the wind. They were hunting us, and they were relentless. It was then that I made a mistake, a terrible, costly mistake. I thought of Sam, my friend. Despite the unease I'd felt, a part of me still clung to the hope that he wasn't part of this, that he could help. "There's a ranch nearby," I told Tall Chief. "A friend of mine, Sam Riley. He might be able to help us. Give us fresh horses, supplies." Tall Chief looked at me, her dark eyes narrowed. "You trust this friend?" Her question hit me like a punch to the gut. Did I trust Sam? I wanted to. God, how I wanted to. But the image of his shifty gaze, his evasive words, it haunted me. He's a good man," I said, more to convince myself than her. "He wouldn't be a part of this." She didn't say anything, but her silence was heavy with doubt. Still, she agreed to follow me. We needed help, and if Sam was truly a friend, he could provide it. We reached Sam's ranch just before dawn. The place was quiet, too quiet. A sense of unease settled over me, heavier than before. I dismounted, told Tall Chief to wait with the horses, hidden in a small grove of cottonwoods nearby. I approached the cabin, my hand hovering near my Colt. "Sam?" I called out, my voice tight. "Sam, you in there?" The door creaked open, and Sam stepped out. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. His eyes were bloodshot, his face pale and drawn. "Jesse?" he said, his voice hoarse. "What are you doing here?" "I need your help, Sam," I said, trying to keep the desperation out of my voice. "The mob, they're after Tall Chief. We need a place to lay low fresh horses." Sam looked past me, towards the cottonwoods where Tall Chief was hidden. His eyes darted around nervously. "Jesse, you shouldn't be here," he whispered, his voice shaking. "You need to leave. Now." "What are you talking about, Sam?" I demanded, my suspicion growing with every passing second. "Are you going to help us or not?" He wrung his hands, his face a mask of anguish. I can't, Jesse. I'm sorry." And then I saw it, a flicker of movement behind him, in the darkened doorway of the cabin, a glint of metal. My blood ran cold. "Sam," I said, my voice deadly calm. "Who's in there with you?" He wouldn't meet my eyes. Just stared at the ground, his shoulders slumped in defeat. "Jesse, I didn't have a choice." "A choice about what, Sam?" I pressed, my hand now gripping the butt of my Colt. My heart was pounding in my chest, a frantic drumbeat against the sudden, chilling silence, the silence before the storm. Then Caleb Harper stepped out of the cabin, a smug grin plastered across his ugly face. He held a shotgun, its twin barrels pointed squarely at my chest. Behind him, more men emerged, armed to the teeth. The mob. They'd been waiting for me, and Sam. Sam had led me right into their trap. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Betrayal. It hit me with the force of a physical blow, knocking the air from my lungs. Sam, my friend. He'd sold me out. Sold us out. Well, 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 Harper drawled, his eyes glinting with malice. Look what the cat dragged in. Jesse Walker, the Injun lover. My gaze flickered to Sam. He was standing there, frozen, his face a pale mask of misery. He wouldn't look at me. Couldn't look at me. The shame was radiating off him in waves. Sam? I choked out, my voice thick with disbelief and a searing, white-hot rage. Why? He finally looked up, his eyes filled with a desperate, pleading look. They threatened my family, Jesse, he stammered, his voice cracking. My wife, my kids. I had to protect them. His words were like a knife twisting in my gut. Family. He'd chosen them. And in doing so, he'd condemned me, condemned Tall Chief. I understood, on some level. Fear could make a man do terrible things. I'd seen it in the war, but understanding didn't lessen the sting of his betrayal. It didn't quell the inferno of rage and hurt that was consuming me. You son of a bitch! I snarled, my hand tightening on my Colt. I wanted to kill him, right there, right then. I wanted to wipe that pathetic, guilt-ridden look off his face. Harper chuckled, a low, guttural sound. Touching. But your touching reunion will have to wait. We've got an Apache witch to deal with. And you, Walker, you're just a loose end. My mind raced. I was outnumbered, outgunned, trapped. But I wasn't going down without a fight. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let them get their hands on Tall Chief. You'll have to kill me first, Harper, I said, my voice cold and steady, a stark contrast to the turmoil raging inside me. Harper's grin widened. That can be arranged. Just as he was about to give the order, a high-pitched whistle cut through the air. Ember, my mare, reared up, neighing wildly, and then all hell broke loose. Tall Chief. She burst from the cottonwoods like a demon unleashed, her horse thundering towards us, an arrow knocked in her bow. She loosed the arrow, and it struck the shotgun in Harper's hands, sending it flying. Before anyone could react, she was upon them, a whirlwind of deadly grace. I didn't hesitate. I drew my Colt and fired, the bullet catching one of Harper's men in the shoulder. The fight was on. It was chaos. Gunfire erupted from all sides. Men shouted, horses screamed. Dust and smoke filled the air, stinging my eyes, choking my lungs. I fought like a man possessed, fueled by rage and adrenaline. My soldier training kicked in, every movement precise, every shot calculated. But there were too many of them. I saw Sam. He was just standing there amidst the chaos, looking lost and terrified. He wasn't fighting. He was just watching. Watching me. Watching Tall Chief. Watching the bloody mess he'd helped create. For a fleeting moment, our eyes met. And in that moment, I saw not just guilt, but something else. A flicker of regret. A desperate plea for forgiveness. I didn't have time to decipher it. A bullet whizzed past my ear, and I spun around, firing at another of Harper's men. We fought our way out of the ranch, Tall Chief and I. It was a miracle we made it out alive. We were both wounded, bleeding, exhausted, but we were free. For now. As we rode away, leaving Sam's ranch burning behind us, a stray bullet had caught the barn, and the flames were spreading fast. I couldn't shake the image of Sam's face, the face of my friend, my betrayer. The betrayal cut deeper than any bullet. It left a raw, gaping wound in my soul, a wound that I knew would never fully heal, and it was a stark reminder, in this land, trust was a luxury few could afford. And friendship could be as fragile as a desert flower, easily crushed under the heel of fear and self-preservation. The sun was climbing high in the sky, its merciless heat beating down on us. The desert stretched out before us, vast and indifferent. We were fugitives now, hunted by a relentless enemy. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that the worst was yet to come. The weight of Sam's betrayal sat heavy on my chest. I kept replaying that moment at his ranch, his haunted eyes, his stammered excuses. They threatened my family, Jesse. Could I blame him? If I had a wife, kids, what would I have done? It was a question I didn't want to answer. But it didn't change the fact that he'd set me up. He'd chosen his side, and that side was against me. Tall Chief, despite her own injuries, was a pillar of strength. She tended to my wounds with a gentle efficiency, her touch surprisingly soft for a woman who seemed carved from granite. She didn't say much about Sam or the ambush. She just watched me with those knowing eyes of hers, as if she could see right through me, to the turmoil churning within. "He was your friend," she said softly, as she cleaned a gash on my arm. Her voice was devoid of judgment, just a simple statement of fact. "I thought he was," I muttered, wincing as the antiseptic stung my wound. Turns out I didn't know him at all. "Fear makes cowards of many men," she said, her gaze distant. "And loyalty. Loyalty is a rare stone in these lands." Her words, though harsh, held a certain truth. I'd seen it time and again, in the war, in this desolate frontier. Men turning on each other for a piece of land, a handful of gold, or simply to save their own skins. But Sam, I'd trusted him, implicitly. And that trust, now shattered, left a bitter taste in my mouth. We rode deeper into the desert, seeking refuge in its unforgiving embrace. The heat was relentless, the landscape a blur of sun-baked rock and thorny scrub. We were low on water, our horses exhausted. The mob, I knew, wouldn't be far behind. Harper wasn't the type to give up easily. He wanted Tall Chief's head, and now he wanted mine too. It was during those desperate days on the run that I started to learn more about Tall Chief. She spoke of her grandfather, the warrior spirit who guided her. She said he came to her in dreams, in visions, offering her strength and wisdom. At first I was skeptical. Chalked it up to her Apache beliefs, something I, as a white man, couldn't understand. But then, strange things started happening. One evening, as we were huddled around a small, smokeless fire, Tall Chief suddenly went still. Her eyes unfocused, her breathing shallow. She seemed to be listening to something I couldn't hear. After a few moments, she looked at me, her eyes sharp and alert. "We must move," she said, her voice urgent. "They are close. They will find us here by morning." I hadn't heard anything, seen anything. But there was a certainty in her voice that I couldn't ignore. We packed up and moved, pushing our weary horses through the night. And sure enough, the next morning, from a high ridge, we saw them. The mob, combing the area where we'd camped just hours before. How had she known? Another time, we were trapped in a narrow canyon, the mob closing in on both ends. There seemed to be no way out. I was ready to make our last stand. But Tall Chief, she just closed her eyes, her lips moving silently. Then she pointed to a sheer rock face. "There," she said. "There is a path." I looked. All I saw was solid rock. But she insisted, and as I got closer, I saw it. A narrow crevice, hidden by shadows and overgrown shrubs. A path barely wide enough for a man and a horse. A path that led us out of the trap. I started to wonder if there was something more to her spirit guide than just belief. There was an uncanny wisdom in her decisions, a sixth sense for danger that defied logical explanation. It was as if she was truly connected to this land, to its secrets, in a way I could only begin to imagine. And then came the moment that changed everything, the moment I discovered the truth about myself. We were hiding in an ancient cliff dwelling, a relic of a long-vanished people. We were both weak from hunger and thirst, our wounds festering in the desert heat. I was feverish, drifting in and out of consciousness. In my delirium, I started muttering, things I hadn't thought about in years, words in a language I didn't even realize I knew. Apache words. When I finally came to, Tall Chief was looking at me, her expression unreadable. "You speak the language of my people," she said, her voice soft. I stared at her, confused. What? What are you talking about? In your fever, she explained. You spoke of your mother. You called her Shima, mother, in Apache. My mind reeled. Shima. The word echoed in my memory, unlocking a flood of forgotten images. My mother, her dark hair, her gentle eyes, the lullabies she used to sing to me, in a language I hadn't understood at the time. My father, a white trader, had married an Apache woman. He'd kept her hidden, ashamed of his squaw wife. When she died, when I was just a boy, he'd forbidden me from ever speaking of her people. He'd beaten the Apache out of me, or so he thought. I'd buried that part of myself so deep, I'd almost forgotten it existed. But Tall Chief, she had seen it. She had heard it in my fevered ramblings. Your blood, it sings the song of the Ende, she said, using the Apache word for the people. I was speechless. The revelation hit me with the force of a thunderbolt. I was Apache, part of me at least. The blood of the people Harper and his mob were so eager to exterminate. It flowed in my veins. Suddenly, so many things made sense. My inexplicable connection to this land, my fierce, almost primal urge to protect Tall Chief. It wasn't just about justice or morality. It was about kinship. About a part of myself I'd denied for too long. A wave of shame washed over me. Shame for my father's bigotry. Shame for my own ignorance, my own cowardice in not embracing who I truly was. Tall Chief reached out and placed her hand on my arm. Her touch was surprisingly gentle. Do not be ashamed, Jesse Walker, she said, her voice firm but kind. The path to knowing oneself is often long and difficult. What matters is that you know now. Her words, her acceptance, they were like a balm to my wounded soul. In that moment, something shifted between us. The wall of mistrust that had separated us began to crumble. We were no longer just a white man and an Apache woman fighting for survival. We were something more. Two souls, scarred and battered, finding solace and strength in each other's company. The knowledge of my heritage didn't make our situation any less desperate. The mob was still out there, hunting us. But it gave me a new sense of purpose, a new reason to fight. I wasn't just fighting for Tall Chief anymore. I was fighting for my people, for myself. And as the desert night closed in around us, I knew one thing for sure. I would not let Harper win. I would not let him erase Tall Chief or the legacy of the Apache people. Not while I still had breath in my body. The fight was far from over, and I had a feeling it was about to get a whole lot bloodier. The knowledge of my Apache bloodline didn't magically make me a better tracker or a deadlier shot, but it settled something in me, like a missing piece of a puzzle clicking into place. The shame was still there, a dull ache in my chest, but alongside it, a new kind of pride began to flicker. A fierce, defiant pride, the kind that made me want to spit in Harper's eye and tell him he couldn't erase who I was, who we were. We pushed on, deeper into the Badlands. The terrain grew more treacherous, the sun more brutal. Water was a constant worry. We rationed what little we had, our throats parched, our lips cracked and bleeding. Ember and Tall Chief's paint horse, a wiry, tenacious animal she called Wind Chaser, were suffering too, their heads hanging low, their steps weary. Tall Chief seemed to draw strength from the land itself. While I wilted under the relentless sun, she moved with a quiet determination, her eyes constantly scanning the horizon, her ears attuned to the faintest sound. She showed me how to find water in unexpected places, a seep hidden beneath a cluster of rocks, moisture cupped in the leaves of a desert plant. She taught me which roots were safe to eat, which berries could sustain us. She was a part of this wild, unforgiving land, and it, in turn, seemed to sustain her. And her grandfather, his presence became more palpable. It wasn't just her talk anymore. I started to feel it. Or maybe I was just going crazy from the heat and the hunger. But there were moments. One afternoon, we were resting in the scant shade of a crumbling rock overhang. I was dozing fitfully, plagued by nightmares of Sam's betrayal, of Harper's leering face. Suddenly, Tall Chief gasped, her eyes wide, fixed on something beyond the rock wall. "He is here," she whispered, her voice hushed with reverence. "My grandfather. He warns us." I sat up, my hand instinctively going to my Colt. "Warns us of what?" She didn't answer immediately. Her gaze was distant, as if she were looking into another world. Her lips moved silently, as if in conversation. Then, she blinked, her focus returning to me. "Harper's men," she said, her voice urgent. "They have split up. One group is trying to circle around us, to cut off our escape route through the pass ahead. The other is close. Too close." I scrambled to my feet, peering out from behind the rocks. The desert looked empty, shimmering under the midday sun. "I don't see anything." "They are hidden," she insisted. "In the arroyo to the west. They wait for us to move." Her certainty was unnerving. There was no way she could have seen them, heard them. Yet, I found myself believing her. Her connection to this land, to her ancestors' spirit. It was real, tangible. "What do we do?" I asked, my voice low. She pointed to a narrow, almost invisible game trail that snaked up the side of the canyon. "We climb," she said. "It will be difficult, dangerous, but it will lead us above them. They will not expect it." It was a hellish climb. The trail was steep, treacherous, littered with loose rock. Our horses struggled, their hooves slipping, their breath coming in ragged gasps. We had to dismount and lead them, pulling, coaxing, praying they wouldn't lose their footing and send us all tumbling into the abyss below. The sun beat down on us mercilessly. My muscles screamed in protest, my lungs burned. Several times I thought I couldn't go on. But then I'd look at Tall Chief, her face set in a mask of grim determination, her eyes fixed on the summit, and I'd find a new reserve of strength. Her quiet courage was infectious. We reached the top just as the sun was beginning to dip below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery hues. From our vantage point we could see them, Harper's men, exactly where Tall Chief had said they would be, lying in ambush in the arroyo below. They were looking towards the pass, expecting us to walk right into their trap. A cold shiver ran down my spine. If it hadn't been for Tall Chief, for her grandfather's warning, we'd be dead. Or worse. "Your grandfather," I said, my voice hoarse with exhaustion and awe. "He saved us." Tall Chief nodded, a faint smile touching her lips. "He walks with us," she said softly. "He will not abandon his people." But our reprieve was short-lived. Harper was like a damn bloodhound. He wouldn't give up. We knew he'd find our trail eventually. We were running out of options, running out of time. Our horses were failing. We were low on ammunition, and we were so damn tired. It was a few days later, when we were at our lowest ebb, that he appeared. We were cornered. Harper and his men had tracked us to a small box canyon. The walls were too steep to climb, the entrance blocked by a dozen heavily armed men. This was it. The end of the line. I checked my Colt. 3 bullets left. My rifle was empty. Tall Chief had a handful of arrows. Not enough, not nearly enough. "Well, Tall Chief," I said, trying to inject a note of bravado I didn't feel into my voice. "Looks like this is where we make our stand." She nodded, her eyes blazing with a fierce, defiant light. There was no fear in her, only a warrior's resolve. "We will die fighting," she said, her voice calm. "As our ancestors did." Harper's voice boomed across the canyon, echoing off the rock walls. "It's over, Walker. Tall Chief, come out with your hands up, or we'll come in and drag you out." I exchanged a look with Tall Chief. We both knew surrender wasn't an option. Not with Harper. He'd make our deaths slow and painful. I raised my Colt, ready to sell my life dearly. Tall Chief knocked an arrow, her movements fluid and precise, even in the face of certain death. And then, a new voice cut through the tense silence, a voice that was old and weathered, yet surprisingly strong. "Now, hold on there, Caleb Harper. That ain't no way to treat a lady, or a man who's just trying to do the right thing." Harper and his men whirled around, surprised. So were we. Standing at the entrance to the canyon, blocking their path, was an old man. He was tall and wiry, his face a road map of wrinkles, his eyes a startling, piercing blue. He wore buckskins, old and faded, and carried a long, antique rifle with an air of quiet authority. He looked like he'd stepped right out of another era. "Who in the Sam Hill are you, old man?" Harper snarled, clearly irritated by this unexpected interruption. The old man chuckled, a dry, rustling sound. "The name's Jedediah Stone," he said, his voice calm and steady. "And I reckon you boys are about to make a big mistake." Harper scoffed. "Get out of our way, old-timer. This ain't your concern." Jedediah Stone didn't budge. He just stood there, his rifle resting comfortably in the crook of his arm, his blue eyes fixed on Harper. "Oh, I think it is," he said, his voice taking on a steely edge. "You see, I owe a debt to the Apache people. A debt I intend to repay." My jaw nearly dropped. Who was this man? Where had he come from? Harper, however, was not impressed. "You and what army, old man?" he sneered. Jedediah smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Sometimes, Caleb," he said, his voice dropping to a near whisper, yet carrying clearly across the canyon. "One good man standing in the right place at the right time, well, he can be army enough." And then, with a speed that belied his age, Jedediah raised his rifle and fired. The shot was true, kicking up dust at Harper's feet, not a killing shot. A warning shot. Harper's men, startled, raised their own weapons, but Jedediah was already reloading, his movements swift and practiced. "Now, I suggest you boys think real hard about your next move," Jedediah said, his voice a low growl. "Because I ain't in the mood for games." There was something about him, an aura of quiet power, of unshakable resolve. He wasn't just some crazy old coot. He was a fighter, a seasoned warrior, and he was on our side. Harper hesitated. He looked at Jedediah, then at us, then back at Jedediah. He was clearly weighing his options. He had the numbers. But Jedediah was an unknown quantity, and he looked like he meant business. Finally, with a snarl of frustration, Harper lowered his rifle. "This ain't over, old man," he spat. "Or you, Walker, or your Apache whore. We'll be back." And with that, he and his men retreated, leaving us alone with our unexpected savior. I lowered my Colt, my hand shaking. I couldn't believe what had just happened. We were alive, saved by a mysterious old man who'd appeared out of nowhere. Jedediah Stone walked towards us, his rifle still held at the ready. He looked at Tall Chief, then at me. His blue eyes were sharp, assessing. "You folks all right?" he asked, his voice gruff but not unkind. We are now," I stammered, still trying to process what had just happened. "Thanks to you. But who are you? Why did you help us?" Jedediah leaned his rifle against a rock and pulled out a pouch of tobacco and a pipe. "Like I said," he said, as he began to fill his pipe, "I owe a debt to the Apache." He then told us his story. He'd been a young man, a trapper, when he'd first come to this land. He'd gotten lost, caught in a blizzard, near frozen to death. An Apache hunting party had found him. Instead of killing him, as he'd expected, they'd taken him in, nursed him back to health. He'd lived with them for a time, learned their ways, their language. He'd even fought alongside them, against other tribes, against the encroaching white settlers. "They were good people," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Honorable people. They taught me what it means to be a true warrior, to live in harmony with the land, to respect all living things." He'd left them eventually, gone back to his own kind, but he'd never forgotten their kindness, their wisdom. He'd heard about Tall Chief, about the mob hunting her. He'd been tracking them for days, waiting for the right moment to intervene. "I couldn't let them do to her what they did to so many others," he said, his eyes dark with remembered pain. "The Apache have suffered enough." His words resonated deep within me. He was a white man, yet he understood. He saw the injustice, the cruelty. He was a living testament to the fact that not all white men were like Harper. Tall Chief listened to his story in silence, her expression unreadable. When he was finished, she stepped forward and placed her hand on his arm. "Shisinde," she said softly. "My friend." It was the Apache word for friend, but it meant more than that. It meant ally, brother. Jedediah smiled, his weathered face softening. "It is an honor, Tall Chief," he said. His arrival was a turning point. Not just because he'd saved our lives, but because he'd given us something we'd almost lost: hope. We weren't alone anymore. We had an ally, a powerful one. But we all knew this wasn't over. Harper would be back. And he'd be angrier, more determined than ever. We needed a plan. A way to end this, once and for all. Jedediah, with his knowledge of the land and his experience as a fighter, helped us devise a strategy. There was an old, abandoned mission, nestled in a narrow valley not far from Silver Creek. It was defensible, with thick adobe walls and a commanding view of the surrounding terrain. If we could lure Harper and his men there, we might have a chance. A slim one, but a chance nonetheless. The thought of another battle, more bloodshed, filled me with a weary dread. I was so tired of fighting, so tired of the killing. But what choice did we have? It was either fight or die. And I wasn't ready to die. Not yet. Not until I'd seen this through. Not until Tall Chief was safe, and Sam. The thought of Sam still gnawed at me. What would happen if we faced him again? Could I do what needed to be done? The thought made me sick to my stomach. As we prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I found myself drawing strength from Tall Chief and Jedediah. Tall Chief, with her unwavering courage and her deep connection to her heritage. Jedediah, with his quiet wisdom and his fierce loyalty. They were an unlikely pair, the Apache warrior woman and the old white mountain man. But together, they were a force to be reckoned with. And me? I was still figuring out who I was. Jesse Walker, the former soldier. Jesse Walker, the man with Apache blood. Jesse Walker, the reluctant hero. Maybe I was all of those things. Maybe it didn't matter. What mattered was that I was here, now, standing with them, ready to face whatever came our way. The final battle was looming. I could feel it in the air, in the unnatural stillness of the desert, in the frantic beating of my own heart. It was going to be a fight to the death. And I knew, with a chilling certainty, that not all of us would make it out alive. The air in the old mission was thick with the smell of dust and decay, and something else: anticipation. We'd worked tirelessly, Jedediah, Tall Chief, and I, fortifying the crumbling adobe walls, creating choke points, setting up fields of fire. Jedediah, with his years of fighting experience, was a master tactician. He knew how to use the terrain to our advantage, how to turn our weaknesses into strengths. Tall Chief moved like a phantom, her knowledge of stealth and guerrilla warfare invaluable. She showed us how to set snares, how to create diversions, how to use the shadows to our advantage. Her grandfather's spirit seemed to be with her constantly, guiding her movements, sharpening her senses. Sometimes I'd catch her muttering to herself in Apache, her eyes distant, as if she were receiving instructions from another realm. I still didn't fully understand it, but I damn well respected it. That woman was a force of nature. As for me, I was a bundle of nerves and raw determination. The soldier in me took over, cleaning my weapons, checking my ammunition, mentally preparing for the hell that was about to break loose. But beneath the surface, a storm of emotions raged. Fear, anger, a desperate longing for this to be over. And guilt. So much guilt. Guilt over the men I'd killed in the war. Guilt over the violence I was about to unleash again. Guilt over Sam. The thought of Sam was a constant throbbing ache in my chest. What if he was with Harper? What if I had to face him? The idea of raising my gun against the man who had once been my friend, it was unbearable. But I also knew, with a cold, hard certainty, that if he stood with Harper, if he tried to harm Tall Chief, I would do what I had to do. Survival had a way of stripping away sentimentality, leaving only the brutal, unvarnished truth. We didn't have to wait long. As dusk began to settle, casting long, eerie shadows across the valley, we saw them. A dark column of riders approaching the mission. Harper and his mob. They were more numerous than before, their faces grim, their eyes burning with a thirst for vengeance. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The final showdown. "They're here," Jedediah said, his voice calm, his eyes narrowed as he peered through a crack in the adobe wall. "Looks like Harper brought the whole damn town with him." Tall Chief stood beside me, her face serene, her bow clutched tightly in her hand. She looked like an ancient warrior queen, ready to defend her kingdom to the last breath. There was a terrifying beauty in her stillness, in her absolute resolve. "Let them come," she said, her voice a low whisper. "They will find only death here." The first wave of Harper's men charged the mission, whooping and yelling, firing their guns wildly. It was a foolhardy attack, born of arrogance and bloodlust, and we were ready for them. Jedediah's long rifle barked, and the lead rider tumbled from his horse. Tall Chief loosed an arrow, swift and silent, and another man cried out, clutching his shoulder. I opened up with my Colt, firing with a deadly precision I hadn't known I still possessed. The courtyard of the mission became a charnel house. The air filled with the roar of gunfire, the screams of wounded men, the acrid smell of gunpowder and blood. Dust flew, kicked up by thundering hooves and falling bodies. It was chaos, a maelstrom of violence and death. We fought like cornered wolves, fierce and desperate. Jedediah was a rock, his shots methodical, devastating. Tall Chief was a whirlwind of motion, her arrows finding their mark with uncanny accuracy, her knife flashing in close quarters. And I was a machine, a killing machine. The man I'd tried to bury, the soldier, the killer, he was back in full force, and he was terrifying. But Harper's men kept coming. They were driven by a fanatical hatred, a blind rage that made them reckless, fearless. They swarmed the walls, trying to find a way in. We beat them back, again and again, but they were relentless. And then I saw him. Sam. He was with a group of men trying to breach a crumbling section of the wall. He had a rifle in his hands, his face pale and sweat-streaked, his eyes wide with a mixture of fear and a terrible dawning resolution. He wasn't just a bystander anymore. He was one of them. He was fighting against us. Our eyes met across the blood-soaked courtyard. For a fraction of a second, the world seemed to stop. The roar of the battle faded. It was just me and Sam, locked in a silent, agonizing embrace of betrayal and broken friendship. I saw the pain in his eyes, the shame, the regret. But I also saw something else in Sam's eyes. A hardening, a decision made. He raised his rifle, his sights finding me. The man I'd shared drinks with, laughed with, trusted with the raw parts of my soul, was about to try and kill me. My heart shattered into a million pieces. The betrayal, which had been a festering wound, now felt like a fatal blow. "I didn't want this." The words screamed in my head, a desperate, silent plea. But there was no time for pleas, no room for hesitation. It was him or me. Him or Tall Chief. "Then you'll fight, like we always do." Tall Chief's voice, from somewhere beside me, was a fierce whisper, cutting through the fog of my despair. Her words were a lifeline, a brutal reminder of the reality of our situation. I raised my Colt. My hand was shaking, not with fear, but with a grief so profound it threatened to swallow me whole. I could see Sam's finger tightening on the trigger. There was no other way. The shot echoed in the sudden, deafening silence that seemed to fall over our small corner of the battle. My shot, not his. Sam stumbled back, his rifle clattering to the ground. A dark stain blossomed on his chest. His eyes, wide with shock and a dawning, terrible understanding, found mine one last time. Then he crumpled, falling like a puppet whose strings had been cut. Dead. I'd killed him. I'd killed my best friend. The world went red. A roaring filled my ears, drowning out the sounds of the battle. I don't remember what happened next, not clearly. It's a blur of rage and grief and a desperate animalistic will to survive. I fired my Colt until it was empty, then grabbed my rifle, swinging it like a club. I fought with a savagery that scared even myself. I was no longer Jesse Walker, the rancher, the reluctant hero. I was an instrument of death, a vessel of pure, unadulterated fury. The battle raged on. Men fell. Blood soaked the parched earth. The stench of death hung heavy in the air. Jedediah fought like a demon, his ancient rifle spitting fire, his weathered face a mask of grim determination. Tall Chief was a whirlwind of deadly grace, her arrows finding their mark, her knife flashing, her war cries piercing the din of battle. She fought for her ancestors, for her land, for her very existence, and I fought because there was nothing left to do but fight. I fought to protect Tall Chief, to honor Jedediah's sacrifice, and maybe, just maybe, to atone for the sin of killing my friend. Slowly, inexorably, the tide began to turn. Harper's men, battered and bloodied, their numbers dwindling, their resolve faltering, began to fall back. They had come for a lynching, for an easy victory. They had found a hornet's nest. They had found warriors. Finally, only Caleb Harper remained. He stood in the middle of the courtyard, surrounded by the bodies of his men, his face contorted with rage and disbelief. His fancy clothes were torn and blood-stained, his bravado shattered. He looked like a cornered animal, dangerous and desperate. He raised his pistol, his eyes wild. "You think you've won?" He spat, his voice hoarse. "This isn't over. We'll always come for you. For your kind." Jedediah stepped forward, his rifle leveled at Harper's chest. "It's over, Caleb," he said, his voice weary but firm. "It's time to end this." Harper laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "You can't kill an idea, old man. You can't kill hatred." "Maybe not," I said, my voice raw, my throat aching. I stepped up beside Jedediah, my empty Colt still in my hand. I felt hollowed out, drained. "But we can sure as hell kill the men who spread it." For a long moment, Harper stared at us, his eyes burning with a venom that was almost palpable. Then, with a final defiant snarl, he lunged, his pistol firing wildly. Jedediah didn't flinch. His rifle cracked once, a sharp, definitive sound. Harper stumbled, clutched his chest, and fell to his knees. He stared up at us, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and a dawning, terrible realization. Then, with a rattling gasp, he collapsed, face down in the dust. Dead. Silence. A profound, ringing silence descended upon the mission, broken only by the moans of the wounded and the mournful sigh of the wind. The battle was over. We had won. But at what cost? I looked down at my hands. They were covered in blood. Sam's blood. The blood of other men I didn't even know. I felt sick. The adrenaline that had sustained me drained away, leaving me weak, trembling, overwhelmed by a crushing wave of grief and self-loathing. "I never wanted this," I whispered, the words catching in my throat. I never wanted to be here again. The ghosts of the war, the ghosts of my past, they were all here, swirling around me, their accusing eyes boring into my soul. Jedediah put a hand on my shoulder, his grip surprisingly strong. "You did what you had to do, son," he said, his voice gentle. "Don't let it eat you alive." But how could it not? I had killed my friend. A part of me had died with him. Tall Chief stood a little apart, her face unreadable. She surveyed the carnage with a quiet intensity, her eyes reflecting the harsh reality of survival. There was no triumph in her expression, only a deep, profound weariness. The cost of this victory was etched on her face, in the lines of exhaustion around her eyes, in the slump of her shoulders. The sun began to rise, casting its pale, indifferent light on the scene of slaughter. The mission, once a place of peace, was now a tomb. The ground was littered with bodies, with broken weapons, with the shattered remnants of hatred and violence. We buried the dead, ours and theirs. It was a grim, thankless task. Jedediah, despite his age, worked tirelessly, his face set in a mask of stoic grief. Tall Chief moved with a quiet dignity, her movements economical, her sorrow buried deep beneath a veneer of stoic resolve. I worked in a daze, my mind numb, my body aching. Every spadeful of earth felt like a weight on my soul. When we came to Sam's body, I couldn't do it. I just stood there, staring down at his lifeless face, the image seared into my memory. Jedediah gently took the shovel from my hand and finished the job. Afterward, we sat in the ruins of the mission, the silence heavy between us. The sun climbed higher, its heat oppressive, baking the blood-soaked ground. The air was thick with the smell of death and dust. Jedediah finally broke the silence. "Harper's mob is broken," he said, his voice raspy. "Silver Creek will be licking its wounds for a long time. They won't be bothering you again, Tall Chief. Not for a while, anyway." Tall Chief nodded slowly, her gaze fixed on the distant mountains. "The land remembers," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "It remembers the blood that has been spilled. It remembers the price of survival." She turned to me, her dark eyes searching mine. "You fought well, Jesse Walker," she said. "You fought like an Apache warrior." Her words, meant as a compliment, felt like a brand on my soul. An Apache warrior. Was that who I was now? A killer? A man who could take the life of his friend? I couldn't meet her gaze. I was too ashamed, too broken. Later that day, as the sun began to dip towards the horizon, casting long, mournful shadows across the valley, Tall Chief found me sitting alone on a crumbling adobe wall, staring out at the desolate landscape. The ghosts were loud in my head, whispering accusations, replaying the moment I shot Sam over and over again. She sat down beside me, her presence a quiet comfort in the overwhelming silence. For a long time, neither of us spoke. The only sounds were the sigh of the wind through the ruined arches of the mission and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. "The killing. It changes a person," I finally said, my voice hoarse. "It leaves a mark. A stain that never washes out." Tall Chief nodded, her gaze distant. "To survive is to carry scars," she said softly. "Some are on the skin. Others are deeper, in the spirit." She looked at me then, her eyes filled with a wisdom that seemed ancient, profound. "My grandfather, he taught me that life is a circle. Birth, death, renewal. The fight for survival is part of that circle. It is not something to be ashamed of. It is what we do. It is who we are." "But Sam," I choked out, the name a raw wound in my throat. "He was my friend." "He made his choice," Tall Chief said, her voice gentle but firm. "As you made yours. In the moment of battle, there is no room for friendship, for regret. There is only survival. The Apache code is harsh, Jesse Walker, but it is also true. We fight to live. We honor those who fall, even our enemies, and we carry on. Because life is a precious gift, and it is worth fighting for." Her words, though stark, offered a sliver of solace, a different perspective. Not an excuse, not a justification, but an understanding, a way to make sense of the senseless violence, the unbearable loss. "The Apache code," I repeated, tasting the words on my tongue. It was a part of me now, whether I wanted it to be or not. My Apache blood, my actions, the path I had chosen, they had all led me here, to this moment, to this brutal understanding. "It is a hard path," Tall Chief said, her eyes reflecting the fading light. "But it is our path, the path of the NDE, the people. We endure, we survive, we remember. That is our strength. That is our legacy." She reached out and placed her hand on my arm. Her touch was light, yet it seemed to anchor me, to pull me back from the brink of despair. "You are not alone, Jesse Walker," she said softly. "You carry the blood of warriors. You carry the spirit of this land. Do not let the ghosts consume you. Let them make you stronger." We sat there in silence for a while longer, watching the stars begin to prick the darkening sky. Her words echoed in my mind, offering a fragile hope, a path forward through the darkness. The grief was still there, a heavy weight in my chest. The guilt would likely never leave me. But perhaps I could learn to live with it. Perhaps I could find a way to honor Sam's memory, not by succumbing to despair, but by living a life worthy of the sacrifice. The next morning, we parted ways. Jedediah, his duty done, rode off into the sunrise, a solitary figure disappearing into the vastness of the desert. He was a legend, a relic of a bygone era, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, courage and honor could still be found. Tall Chief, too, prepared to leave. She was heading deeper into the mountains, to a place her grandfather had spoken of, a hidden sanctuary where she hoped to find peace, to rebuild her life. "Will I see you again?" I asked, the question hanging heavy in the air. She looked at me, a faint smile touching her lips. "The desert is vast, Jesse Walker," she said, "but paths have a way of crossing when they are meant to." She mounted Windchaser, her movements fluid and graceful. For a moment she just sat there, a proud, indomitable figure silhouetted against the rising sun. Then, with a nod, she turned her horse and rode away, disappearing into the rugged landscape as silently and mysteriously as she had first appeared. I watched her go, a strange mixture of sadness and gratitude welling up inside me. She had saved my life, in more ways than one. She had shown me who I was, who I could be. She had taught me the meaning of survival, the price of freedom. I was left alone, in the ruins of the mission, with the ghosts of my past and the uncertain future stretching out before me. Silver Creek was no longer a place I could call home. I had made too many enemies there, spilled too much blood. I was a marked man. So I did the only thing I could do. I rode away. I turned my back on the violence and the hatred, on the memories of Sam and the battle. I rode towards the horizon, towards the unknown, carrying the weight of my actions, the lessons I had learned, and the faint, flickering hope that somewhere, someday, I might find peace. It's been years since that day. I've wandered far, seen many things. I've tried to build a new life, to leave the past behind. But the ghosts, they still walk with me. Sam's face still haunts my dreams. The roar of the battle still echoes in my ears. I don't know if I'll ever find peace. Maybe peace isn't in the cards for men like me, men who have seen too much, done too much. But I carry on. I endure. I remember, as Tall Chief taught me. And sometimes, on a quiet night, when the desert wind sighs through the canyons, I think I hear her voice, her grandfather's wisdom, whispering on the wind. And I know that somewhere out there, the spirit of the Apache, the spirit of the NDE, is still alive. And that perhaps is enough. This is my confession, my burden, my truth. Make of it what you will. I just needed to tell someone, before the ghosts consume me completely.